Hello, this is Alex. Now, today we are going to be talking about Tylenol and its effect on pregnant women, as well as the global geopolitical tensions going on with Russia, particularly with the planes that are flying rather closely to Alaska, as well as talk more about the left and Kamala Harris and Jimmy Kimmel. So, first we'll talk about Tylenol. This has been all over the place, all over social media. You've seen memes about it, people doing all these different things saying, oh, I got all these problems because my pregnant mother took a bunch of Tylenol. But as we know, with anything, when you're pregnant, there are a lot of disclaimers. You cannot take too much of anything, herbal supplements, a bunch of different things, because you're having a placenta. Different things can go into the placenta, but of course, you always go with your doctor, discuss that with them, and just express your concerns. And of course, with Tylenol in particular, it has been historically considered the safest, according to several medical groups and pediatricians. They've pretty much just said, hey, Tylenol, if you're having pain or if you're having some other type of issues, it is the safest option. It's not saying it's 110% safe. It just means it's the safest as opposed to using another pain relief option, such as, let's say, something that would be considered normal for someone else, like small amounts of morphine or fentanyl under a doctor's care that's given at very, very minuscule amounts, or ibuprofen or other kind of things that you can just buy in your store. But with that said, the people are turning this into a political discussion. Of course, just because it comes from the Trump administration, those on the left have been saying, oh, well, just because it comes from the right, we are going to do whatever we can to dismiss or demonize the right and say that, hey, they're just rushing to conclusions. And maybe in some sense, maybe they are, but studies have shown that this issue with Tylenol is based on correlation, not direct causation. So let's actually get into what the technical aspects are of it and what the evidence is. So the foundational observational studies, there is a correlation that actually was done by a nurse's health study number 2 in Boston birth cohort. They found a statistical correlation that when Tylenol was taken during pregnancy, there was an increased risk of ADHD or autism. Not necessarily a direct risk, but an increased risk because he saw a correlation of more of those incidences happening with those women. So essentially, it was a neurodevelopmental study. And basically, JFK and Trump, they've pretty much said in the beginning, I know JFK probably had some sidebars with Trump and said, hey, autism is a very, very important issue for me, and I want to find out what's going on. So this is what he released. He seemed to be very, very confident that this was part of the reason. So there's different theories on why Tylenol may be doing this. So one is oxidative stress. So when acetaminophen is taken, also because actually the brand name is Tylenol, acetaminophen is the chemical name. It creates a byproduct called NAPQI, and essentially what happens is the body has to raise its immune system to kind of go in and use glutathione and to try to neutralize that, to try to make it harmless, to neutralize it. Just like with everything we put in our body, there's things in our kidneys, our liver, or different parts of our body that try to combat that and neutralize whatever that invading element that's going into our body. So the idea is with this particular thing, the fetal vulnerability point is that oxidative stress puts the fetal portion of the pregnant woman at, it's at a vulnerable state, and that could potentially create autism. The other theory is the endocrine hormone disruption. So as we know, the endocrine system, which manages hormones in the body, it's a very complex system. And it's really hard to pinpoint exactly what happens because hormones can react in different ways according to how they're configured in different bodies for whatever reason, environmental, genetic, and really it gets really mind-boggling the more you get into endocrine science. And the reason why this matters in this case for pregnancy is that fetal brain development is very sensitive to hormones. So if hormones are being affected by Tylenol, that's the other theory of why that may cause autism or ADHD. The other theory is neuroinflammation. So inflammation is essentially just when, everything kind of goes into one part of the body, and it can be maybe cells that are kind of conglomerating in there and kind of creating heat or a lot of major activity in that area, which is inflammation. It's part of the normal defense mechanism of the body. So the idea is that inflammation and then in the neural aspect of the fetus is getting inflamed, and that's going to cause ADHD. So as we know, this is correlation. These are theories. We don't know exactly what other factors are considered here, but for the case being, with anything, it's advised by the medical community to, hey, don't be going out there and chugging a bunch of Tylenol, because that's not the right thing to do. So we always got to be balanced with our approach here. So the left is saying, don't worry about this, just ignore it because it comes from the Trump administration. But I would say, hey, hear them out if you're a left-leaning individual, and just try to tread carefully. Don't make any political stunts with there being a consequence of your body having ill effects due to, taking Tylenol because you're protesting the Trump administration. I think it's a horrible idea. So enough of that said. With Tylenol, let's actually talk about our other talking points here. So one thing actually has been horrible, what's been going on has been the increased attacks on our ICE officers and our ICE facilities. So as we know, the last year, 1,000% there has been for an increase of negative press for ICE. And that is primarily because the Trump administration is making this a big part of their agenda to extract or deport undesired immigrants. They're considered undesirable because they're criminal or because they're here illegally, but that's neither here or there. But the issue is that a lot of these media sites on the left are advertising and kind of coordinating this narrative of saying that ICE officers and the whole ICE system under Trump, they have the equivalent to being Nazi officers or slave catchers like in the Old South, because you're arresting American citizens and people that are very afraid. Or as Jasmine Crockett had said, that there's little people, there's innocent people, and that they're American citizens and they're getting arrested for no reason whatsoever, or no good reason. And a lot of this rhetoric has raised the temperature to the point where most recently what happened was a gunman opened fire from a nearby rooftop at a facility targeting a transport van. So this van carried ICE officers as well as detainees. So these detainees were the ones that were shot. And the unfortunate thing, I'm sure, for the assailant is that he killed the detainees. He killed some innocent people. And of course, the ICE officers were innocent as well. But the fact is that this assailant was just shooting bullets. And that kind of indiscriminate shooting was quite sad. And the other sad thing about this is that the bullet casings had things written on them, inscribed on them. And this shows a direct correlation, or like they're trying to copycat the killer of Charlie Kirk, who also engraved and inscribed things in the shell casings that had shot him in the neck. So this is very sad because you basically have an increased temperature on media that's saying, hey, it's okay to go after people that you disagree with politically. And, it's almost like they become superstars, because this guy that had done that, as well as Luigi Mangione, they're almost like, celebrities, or they get like a cult following. And this is becoming more of a trend now in this country, which is quite the issue, because After a while, there's going to be a lot more blowback, and I'm really hoping that we can get this under control, because so far those on the right side of the aisle have not been violent or been proactively being, I don't know, shooting those on the left. So let's hope that never happens. Let's make sure that those on the right play nice and pick the high road on this one, because words are not violence, as the left has said. Actual violence is violence, and violence should be avoided at all cost for the sake of our union and for the sake of basically human decency and for our community, whether it be local, state, national, and because we're being watched by the world, we should be the beacon on the hill that does not resort to these kind of activities or to encourage this kind of rhetoric, whether or not you disagree or agree with a certain political view. So with that said, actually, let's kind of go into the leaders of the Democratic Party. So you have AOC, you have Pete Buttigieg, and then you have Kamala Harris. She essentially is the leader right now, Kamala, because she was the one that was the vice president under Biden, and she was nominated, actually not really even nominated, just kind of installed as being the potential president-elect for the Democratic Party. But because she failed, it seems like it devastated her so much that she just figures, oh, what the heck, I'm just going to burn all my bridges and go on this book tour where I'm just going to say all these negative things about how everybody undermined me and my potential presidency. And, it's the fault of the American people for not choosing me because they weren't ready for a minority woman and things of that nature. It's actually quite similar to that of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton kind of was very angry at the country for that similar reason. So she's been making a book tour, essentially, because she has to sell copies of her book, because who knows what income stream she's going to have in the future. It's hard to say, but it's probably unlikely that she'll run for the presidency again, because you have different people like AOC, Pete Buttigieg, and then you also have Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is actually doing quite well in the polls, and he may do quite a bit better than Kamala Harris. So there's that to consider. And actually, the interesting thing is when Kamala was being interviewed on The View, as well as on, on MSNBC, she was stating that, hey, maybe I would have done better if I'd chosen a better vice president or to as a running mate. So, of course, she chose Tim Walz, and maybe that wasn't the best, in hindsight, choice for her. And the reason why she didn't choose Pete Buttigieg is because he's gay. And she was thinking, perhaps maybe I didn't choose him, or I shouldn't choose him because he is gay. And she was questioned about that. And the thing is, her answer was quite hilarious. It was actually, she was a complete contradiction to what she had said, like within 2 sentences. So essentially she said, I did not choose Pete Buttigieg because he was gay. I only didn't choose him because he was gay. It's like whatever she's saying she didn't choose him because he was okay. I'm going to go there and edit that. So essentially, Kamala Harris said that she didn't choose Pete Buttigieg because he was gay. And then she was asked, well, but you didn't choose him because he was gay? And she says, no, I didn't say that. But it was in her book. It said that. So she said, oh, well, it wasn't because he was gay. It was because he was gay. So I know, it doesn't really make any sense to me either. But that's essentially what she said. All right, and the other issue here is the Russian planes flying close in proximity to Alaska. They weren't actually flying in Alaska. They're not in, let's say, next to a military base or anything like that, but they were in what they considered the ADIZ, the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone. Essentially, long ago, as you know, for more than 100 years ago, Russia actually did own Alaska, and Alaska was sold over to the United States. And it's not that far really from Russia if you think about it, but they were flying maybe a little bit too much, considering the geopolitical tensions that are going on between the world, especially the United States and Russia. So the issue here is that Trump has been getting tired of Putin, right? Because he says all these different things. He's trying to test his boundaries with the United States and NATO and UN and all that. Putin just doesn't want to end the war in Ukraine. And he's trying all of these different things, like flying in different airspaces and trying to call attention or even intimidate or coerce however he can. And basically, when he's questioned about it, he'll say, "Oh, no, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just, just minding my own business doing that." And as he says that, he's bombing, Ukraine and sending drones into Poland. So that is quite the concern. And that is something that I hope that with Putin, I mean, he's advancing in age. I'm not sure if he's trying to establish some kind of legacy by taking over all of Eastern Europe and restoring, let's say, the Soviet Union to its former glory. But at this point, really what the United States and all of its allies need to do is just to kind of keep them in check and make sure that their imperialistic motive and ambition is halted. Because really you cannot have too many superpowers all together to try to have imperialistic motives, because you got China probably allying themselves with Russia, because really they might not like each other that much, but it is an alliance of convenience because they probably want to destabilize the rest of the Western world. And the issue is we really just need to kind of keep that in check, really. And I'm really hoping, just with all of the communication and the kind of incoherent things going on geopolitical things, I really need to, with the rest of the West, we really need to kind of come together on putting a red line between the West and the East, and just say, hey, we're not going to allow any more of this to be done. We're not going to allow you to come into Poland. We're not going to allow you to go into the rest of Eastern Europe. We're not going to allow you to install puppet political figures to be doing your bidding. It's really not going to happen anymore. So with that said, I really do appreciate you listening today, and feel free to comment below if you have any other topics you would like me to discuss, and I will see you on the next episode.